When the news broke that Diane Keaton had passed away at 79, Hollywood froze. Her laughter had been part of the industry's heartbeat, unpredictable, disarming, alive. And then, overnight, it was gone. Tributes poured in from every direction. Directors, co-stars, leaders, and luminaries called her fearless and unforgettable. But one message cut through the noise. It came from Goldie Hawn, her co-star, her confidant, the friend who had seen behind the curtain. And it wasn't what anyone expected. Just 3 words, posted quietly beneath a photograph of the two of them from the first Wives Club days. She deserved it. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. What did Goldie mean? Had there been tension? Was it grief, regret, or something colder? Speculation came fast, certainty didn't. For those who had followed both women, their friendship, their years, their shared defiance, the phrase sounded different, like there was more behind it, something Goldie hadn't shared yet. And that's where this begins. Not with Diane's death, but with the bond that kept her alive through Hollywood's hardest years. Because before anyone could understand those 3 words, they had to understand the women who shared them. To know what she deserved it really meant you have to go back to where the laughter began. To the moment Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton first crossed paths and how 2 opposites became each other's refuge. They met long after both had learned how lonely fame could be. In 1996, on a New York set humming with camera chatter and cigarette smoke, Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton found themselves cast together in the first Wives Club. 3 women scorned, 3 friends reborn, one story about reinvention in middle age. On paper, it was just a comedy. On set, something deeper began to take shape. Goldie was sunlight, spontaneous, unfiltered, the kind of presence that filled a room before she even spoke. Diane was stillness wrapped in curiosity, a quiet observer whose laughter came late but lingered longer. Crew members said they balanced each other like dialogue and silence, one sparking, one grounding, both essential. During breaks, Goldie would hum old show tunes while Diane scribbled notes in a little leather journal. Sometimes they traded glances that said everything about surviving Hollywood as women who refused to disappear. They had fought the same war, different battles, same enemy, the industry's obsession with youth. And without meaning to, they became allies. One night, between takes on a freezing New York street, Goldie saw Diane shivering in her thin wool coat. She took off her own parka and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Don't be so brave," she said softly. Diane smiled, the kind of smile that happens when someone helps you carry the armor. From that night, they weren't just co-stars. They were conspirators against invisibility. Hollywood had paired them for laughs, but what grew instead was a friendship built on quiet rescue. They made each other lighter. Goldie reminded Diane that joy wasn't childish. Diane reminded Goldie that depth wasn't sorrow. When filming ended, their names went back on separate marquees, but the bond stayed. Over the years, they traded long phone calls, birthday dinners, and those tiny necessary check-ins only old friends remember to make. They laughed through divorces, children, and the slow shrinking of fame's spotlight. They watched the world change around them, and they didn't flinch. By the time Diane began turning down public events, retreating into photography and quiet life, Goldie understood. She'd seen that look before, the peace that comes from finally stopping the performance. To outsiders, it looked like Diane was fading. To Goldie, it looked like she was finally free. But that freedom came at a cost. Some days, Diane sounded radiant, others tired. And behind every joke about aging or solitude, Goldie could sense something unspoken, a truth she couldn't name yet. What began as laughter on a film set would one day become something far more profound, the kind of connection only loss could reveal. Diane Keaton was a study in contradictions. She made awkwardness fashionable and kept parts of herself unseen, even at the center of fame. Hollywood celebrated her as the eternal oddball, the hats, the nervous laughter, the charm that never felt rehearsed. But those quirks weren't an act, they were her armor. From the outside, success looked effortless. Annie Hall, The Godfather, Reds, each role captured a version of her that audiences adored, vulnerable yet defiant, uncertain yet magnetic. But when the lights faded, Diane didn't linger at the after-parties. She went home, to her books, her journals, her photos, her silence. Goldie once said Diane was the only person she knew who could fill a room by saying nothing. That silence wasn't emptiness. It was protection. For years, she presented candor on cue. Eventually, she asked what that performance had cost. Fame had never been a dream for her. It was a bargain she made so she could create. By her 50s, Diane had seen what Hollywood did to women who aged on camera. She watched friends shrink under the weight of comparison, surgeries, and fading relevance. She refused to join them. Instead, she turned inward, toward writing, photography, and motherhood. She built a home that didn't care who was watching. Goldie saw that change up close. Sometimes Diane would call late at night, her voice light but distant. She'd talk about how time felt faster now, how she didn't want her legacy to be just movies. She wanted to leave something real, a book, a photograph, a life unperformed. Goldie would listen, sensing that beneath the calm tone was a woman quietly stepping out of the frame. And she was right. Over the next 2 decades, Diane began chasing light, literally and on her terms. Her camera became her new stage, her lens a sanctuary. She photographed sunlight through windows, shadows on walls, the kind of stillness no one applauded but everyone felt. When asked why, she said, "Because it doesn't ask anything from me." Goldie loved that for her, but part of her worried. When someone like Diane retreats, you never know if it's peace or loneliness calling them back. And that question haunted Goldie long after the laughter stopped. She was learning to disappear with grace. Only later would Goldie realize that every silence has a cost. The news reached Goldie Hawn quietly, almost like a rumor too heavy to repeat. One moment, the house in Pacific Palisades was filled with sunlight and the sound of the ocean. The next, it was silent. Diane Keaton, her friend of nearly 3 decades, was gone. Goldie stood at the window. The sea glittered as if nothing had changed. It didn't feel real. Only a week earlier, she'd spoken about calling Diane soon, maybe planning one of their long lunches that always turned into hours of laughter and half-finished stories. Now, the world felt strangely off balance, like the script had been torn in half mid-scene. When the memorial was announced, Goldie didn't rush to cameras or statements. She kept to herself for a few days, letting the quiet settle first. Then, on a Sunday morning, she opened her phone and posted a single photograph. The two of them on the set of the First Wives Club, faces turned toward each other, eyes caught between laughter and mischief. Beneath it, she wrote, "We agreed to grow old together, and one day, maybe live together with all our girlfriends." Well, we never got to live together, but we did grow older together. Who knows? Maybe in the next life. The post went on. Part memory, part love letter, part goodbye. You've left us with a trail of fairy dust, filled with particles of light and memories beyond imagination. How do we say goodbye? What words can come to mind when your heart is broken? You never liked praise, so humble. But now you can't tell me to shut up, honey. Within hours, the message circled the world. Fans wept, co-stars shared stories. Hollywood, so used to scripted emotion, suddenly felt something raw and unscripted. Goldie didn't speak to press. She didn't have to. Those few lines said everything about friendship, gratitude, and the kind of love that doesn't need to explain itself. At the memorial, she sat near the front, clutching a single white rose. When her turn came, her voice trembled but never broke. She didn't read from a script. She spoke softly, more reflection than speech, about how Diane never pretended, never hid, and kept showing up even when it hurt. Afterward, she placed the rose beneath Diane's photograph and lingered there for a moment. Her reflection blurred against the glass. 2 women, one gone, one left to remember. Goldie watched the petals scatter and thought of all the years that had led to this moment. The laughter, the stillness, the strange, unspoken understanding that had always bound them together. And though the silence hurt, it no longer felt empty. It felt like Diane, present, forgiving, and still somehow laughing in the wind. After the memorial, the world seemed to take a collective breath. Clips of Diane Keaton flooded the internet. Interviews, award speeches, moments when she'd make an entire audience laugh just by being herself. Fans posted their favorite lines from Annie Hall and Something's Gotta Give. Younger viewers discovered her for the first time, calling her the last real one. Goldie watched some of those clips late at night, not out of nostalgia, but to see what everyone else was seeing. She felt the world had started to understand what Diane had been trying to teach all along. That eccentricity wasn't a costume, that solitude wasn't sadness, that there was power in stepping back from the noise and letting the world move on without you. In the days that followed, Goldie kept reading. Articles, tributes, essays, all celebrating Diane's independence, her refusal to conform, her quiet rebellion against an industry that demanded constant performance. Every piece seemed to echo something Diane had once said to her on set years ago. "They don't get it, Goldie. I'm not running from the world. I'm just not auditioning for it anymore." Those words had sounded cryptic back then. Now, they made perfect sense. Diane hadn't retreated out of bitterness or fear. She had chosen calm over chaos, silence over spectacle, authenticity over applause. It wasn't defeat, it was self-respect. And that's when Goldie finally opened her phone again. She scrolled through the comments under her own tribute. Thousands of strangers asking what she'd meant by those 3 words. Most thought it was grief talking. Some thought it was guilt. But Goldie knew exactly what she'd meant when she wrote it. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't regret. It was recognition. Because after all the years, all the films, all the noise and expectation, Diane Keaton had finally found what she'd spent a lifetime chasing, her own peace. And in Goldie's eyes, that's exactly what she deserved. For days, people kept asking the same thing. What did Goldie mean? Talk shows debated it. Comment sections filled with theories. Some said it was sarcasm, a dig at Hollywood hypocrisy. Others thought it was grief misfiring into bitterness. But those who knew both women, really knew them, didn't wonder for a second. Because if you'd seen the way Diane Keaton lived her life, the phrase made perfect sense. She deserved it. It wasn't about death, it was about freedom. Diane spent her career pushing against the idea that women had to be likable, or young, or endlessly available to be worthy of attention. When the roles got smaller, she didn't chase relevance. She built her own world instead. A world filled with journals, photography, quiet houses, and unfiltered laughter. She'd once told Vanity Fair, "The less people expect of you, the more you can surprise them." It sounded lighthearted then, but looking back, it was her way of reclaiming power. Goldie understood that now. All those years, she'd watched Diane walk away from opportunities others would have killed for. And she couldn't make sense of it. Why turn down films, interviews, red carpets? Why fade from a stage she'd worked so hard to reach? But sitting in the aftermath of loss, Goldie saw the answer. Diane hadn't been stepping back from life. She'd been stepping into a life she chose, choosing peace over performance, solitude over spectacle. She wasn't retreating, she was arriving. So when Goldie typed "she deserved it" beneath that old photo, it wasn't cynicism, it was relief. A final acknowledgement that her friend had earned the quiet she always sought, the kind of peace Hollywood rarely lets anyone keep. Because in the end, what Diane deserved wasn't pity or headlines or a myth. She deserved rest and freedom on her own terms. And maybe that's why Goldie never explained herself to the press. She didn't need to. Those who understood Diane understood the message already. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a thank you. But endings, especially in Hollywood, never stay endings for long. What followed was proof that Diane's presence didn't vanish. It multiplied. In the days after the memorial, the noise of Hollywood rolled on, the way it always does. New trailers dropped, new shows premiered. But in living rooms, film schools, and late-night watch parties, Diane Keaton kept showing up. Not as a headline, but as a feeling. People pulled her movies off shelves and streaming lists and remembered why she mattered. Because she made people feel safe being themselves. Her legacy wasn't just one role, it was a pattern. The bravery of Annie Hall, a woman who didn't tidy herself up to be loved. The conviction of Reds, a performance built on truth, not charm. The comfort of Something's Gotta Give, proof that life doesn't end when the mirror changes. Even years later, audiences carried those lessons with them. You can be unsure and still be strong, older and still wanted, private and still real. You could see her influence in small things too. The hats, the layers, the way she made odd look beautiful and awkward look brave. Young actors talk about finding a voice. Diane showed how to keep one when the world tries to smooth it out. Directors still point to her timing, how she could hold a pause long enough to make a line land in your chest, not just your ears. Photographers study her portraits for the power of natural light and honest faces. Writers quote the way she answered questions with a laugh and then a truth. And then there's this part of her story that never made posters, the home she built. Diane chose motherhood on her own terms. She adopted her children, Dexter and Duke, in the years when the industry expected a woman to choose career or family. She chose both and redefined success to include burnt toast, school plays, and voices at the dinner table. That choice echoed far beyond her home. It told other women that a life could be assembled piece by piece. not delivered in one perfect package. Goldie thought about that a lot in the week after the service. People called Diane fearless, eccentric, iconic, all true. But the word Goldie kept coming back to was permission. Diane didn't argue with the world about how women should age or work or love. She simply lived the answer. She kept the parts that were hers and let the rest fall away. There was a steadiness to that, a discipline, almost like craft. Film schools curated marathons. Fans posted side-by-side clips, young Diane, older Diane, and noticed that the spark never dimmed. It just changed color. Costume accounts broke down why her style felt timeless, not because it chased fashion, but because it ignored it. Critics wrote that she had expanded the center of Hollywood to fit people who never felt centered in it. And somewhere in that chorus, a quiet truth rose up. The industry had tried to define Diane Keaton, and she had outlasted every definition. Goldie carried the friendship forward in her own way. She picked up scripts and asked a different question than she used to. Less, is this big? And more, is this honest? She caught herself telling younger actresses stories about Diane's patience on set, her refusal to rush a scene, her habit of protecting a moment until it was real. She started keeping a little notebook in her bag, like Diane always did, to catch the small things that vanish if you don't hold them. A light on a wall, a line worth saving, a thought that might turn into courage. The legacy stretched wider than the business. People wrote that Diane helped them dress the way they wanted, speak the way they felt, admit they were scared, and keep going anyway. Some said her movies carried them through divorces, through grief, through the complicated middle of life when nothing looks like the plan. Others said she made them laugh without pretending, which is its own kind of relief. There were industry lessons too. Producers talked, quietly at first, about stories for women over 50 that didn't treat age as a problem to fix. Writers pointed to Diane as proof that a character can be attractive because she is specific, not because she is edited. Casting directors cited the Keaton effect. Audiences respond when a woman on screen looks like a person, not an idea. These weren't tributes, they were adjustments. For Goldie, the loudest part of Diane's legacy was the softest, the way she guarded the life that wasn't for public view. Fame loves access. Diane loved boundaries. She showed a generation that privacy can be an act of self-respect, not a refusal to share. That's the piece that kept returning to Goldie on quiet mornings. Maybe this is what the three words really held, not a verdict on a life, but a blessing for the way it was lived. She deserved it. She deserved to choose the work that fed her. She deserved the joy she kept. She deserved a friendship that didn't need performance to survive. She deserved to turn down what didn't fit, even when it glittered. She deserved to be remembered for all of it. The laughter, the stillness, the stubborn insistence on being exactly who she was. Toward the end of that first week, Goldie walked past a framed photo from the First Wives Club. Three women leaning into each other, mid-laugh, like the floor might fall away, and they'd still be fine as long as they held on. She didn't take the picture down or move it to a place of honor. She just paused, smiled, and kept walking. That felt right. The work was already in the world. The friendship was already part of her. The legacy didn't need rearranging. What remained was simple, and it was enough. The permission Diane gave. To do the scene slower, to wear the thing you love, to say no without explaining, to stop auditioning for a room you don't want to live in. That permission outlives the person who gives it. It crosses rooms, it crosses years, it becomes habit, it becomes home. And that is how the story keeps going, even after the screen fades to black. When the news first broke, Hollywood froze. Now, days later, it breathes again. Slower, softer, as if learning a new rhythm. Because some people don't leave behind silence. They leave behind a frequency only the heart can hear. Diane Keaton was one of them. She taught a noisy world that truth doesn't need to shout, that laughter can be armor and awkwardness can be art, that growing older isn't a tragedy. It's an evolution. And for those who listened closely, she left a map made of gentleness. Find the light, protect your peace, laugh when it's hard, and keep showing up even when it hurts. Goldie knows that map by heart now. Sometimes when the waves outside her window catch the evening light, she still hears that laugh. Quick, unguarded, impossible to forget. It's not haunting, it's reminding. A voice saying, "You're doing fine, honey." And maybe that's what "she deserved it" really means. Not an ending, but an arrival. After a lifetime of giving the world her truth, Diane Keaton finally found the stillness she'd been searching for. a stillness that isn't empty. It's full of love and memory and the echo of laughter that never really stopped.